Hope you enjoyed that intro, everybody. This is Sant, and I'm so ecstatic to be here as part of Everfest Spoiler season. So big shout out to Legend Story Studios and all the other fantastic members of the community that are taking part in this with me. So first things first here, we have the newest Brute Majestic on screen in Swing Big. Now, this sucker is as big as they come. For only 2 resources here, it's swinging in for 8 attack and still blocks 3. And the text box here is something we've never seen in Flesh and Blood before. And that is, this is a card that actually rewards the opponent with something novel if they decide to block it. Not just like blocking Command and Conquer where they just won't get a negative effect. This card actually gives them a reward for fully blocking their damage. So Swing Big here reads, if Swing Big doesn't hit, the defending hero creates a Quicken token when the combat chain closes. So quick shout out, everybody, get your Quicken chicken tokens made up here, because that's really what your opponent's going to be if they don't let this damage through, just a big old chicken. So to talk a little bit about this card and what I think it can do for the game moving forward, I do think first and foremost, this card is going to be great for KO. And that's because you really want in KO those efficient 2-card hands that can potentially flip for just massive amounts of damage. And normally this is around either 6 or 7 base attack. But here we have a card that of course could potentially double for 16 damage because of its 8 base attack here. So KO absolutely going to love this card. You're going to throw it into every Blitz deck because coming in for 16 for 2 resources, well, that is definitely pretty good. Now, for Rhinar in particular, this card is pretty interesting because Rhinar, of course, has access to other ways to make it harder for his opponent to block by triggering Intimidate. So that can help push through what Swing Big is trying to do and make it so that his opponent just doesn't have the choice to block it out fully and gain that Quicken token. But if you think about what Rhinar is actually trying to do trade pattern wise anyway, if he swings into a deck with something like this, 2-card hand for 8, and his opponent decides, okay, I'm going to go ahead block with 2 cards, maybe a 3rd card, maybe 2 cards and a piece of equipment to cover up that 8, and then gain a Quicken, well, the opposing deck is actually going to then have to think pretty carefully about whether or not they can even use that Quicken on their next turn since they just went down 2 cards. Now, if they decide, okay, I'm going to take a slower turn, build my hand up to a larger size so I can actually make use of that Quicken token and not just waste it by returning with like a weapon swing or something, then they're likely just going to Arsenal pass back into the Rhinar, and then the Rhinar gets to operate with a huge 5-card hand if they have Arsenal set up, or 4-card hand if they don't. And Rhinar really, really wants those free turns to keep a large hand. So Swing Big can kind of be a bait in that regard, and I think for some Rhinar game plans, it might be quite good. Now, unfortunately for our girl Levia, I think Swing Big doesn't necessarily fit into how we're currently seeing her played, and that's because Levia is a deck that she really wants to be able to have good 2-card return, but she needs the synergy in Blood Debt where possible. And swinging back, 2-card hand for 8 is something she can do already in Deadwood Rumbler, which is a card which slightly does synergize with Blood Debt, a little bit of randomness to it. But here you now have the option to throw in Swing Big instead, which does block 3, but now can potentially reward your opponent for blocking it. And Levia, if she has that same scenario I was talking about with Rhinar, makes her opponent block tall, take a slow turn to try to set up Arsenal. Levia just can't consistently use a large hand as easily as Rhinar could, because if you just don't have a go again in hand, there's not much you can do with all those extra cards in hand except roll Scabskins and hope to get lucky, which may just be the theme of this set going forward. Now, Swing Big could find a spot in Levia if you actually now start to add some of the go tall effects that will turn off Blood Debt in tandem. All of a sudden you're looking at, with an Unworldly Bellow for 1, Swing Big for 2, you can now pitch 1 blue for this 3-card combo here to come in for 12, turn off Blood Debt, and present a really tall attack that your opponent would have to basically fully block with their hand to get that Quicken token for. So you could maybe see builds like that coming in the future, but I think as of now, it's going to take a lot of experimenting to get Swing Big to work in how we like to play Levia. And then funny enough, this card is actually something you should never play into a Levia, or a chain for that matter, because swinging in for 8 just means, okay, I'll go ahead, use Carrion Husk, not only cover up 6 block, and, throw in another card to fully block it so that they get the Quicken token, but Carrion Husk has now done exactly that, blocked 6 and given a Quicken token as well. So, yeah, definitely don't play this against your Chain or Leviah opponents, because they are going to love to make use of that Quicken, because it's not going to take them that massive amount of cards in hand to actually block out. They just get this beautiful piece of equipment here. And then, so last thing to say about this card before we wrap up the video, because I want to keep it brief so y'all can get back to all the other wonderful spoilers we're seeing this set. Big shout out to the artist here in Fu Thu. I hope I said that right. The artwork is fantastic on Swing Big. It is just a giant brute crashing through a forest, blooding up some people on the way. And this artist has done some other amazing work in Exude Confidence and Massacre, actually. So very, very well-established artist in the Flesh and Blood world. So big shout out to him. And thank you once again to LSS for sending me this really, really cool promo here in the beautiful foiling. So with that, this has been Sant. And if you want to see this card in action, it actually was played in the Leviah versus KO Best of 3 series. So you can find that on screen now. Have a good one.